Welcome to the Cables to Clouds podcast. Cloud adoption is on the rise, and many network infrastructure professionals are being asked to adopt a hybrid approach. As individuals who have already started this journey, we would like to empower those professionals with the tools and the knowledge to bridge the gap.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cables to Clouds. This is Tim, your host this week, and we have a very special guest with us this week. Danan Lightfoot is here from AWS, and actually, it's funny to introduce you like this, Danan. We've known each other for a while now, but hey, man, it's finally good to be able to collaborate and get you in and do something.
Hey, team, thanks for having me on. It's good to come, connect with you, Tim. Like you said, we've been friends for a while. We always talked about doing something, so it's good to, collaborate on, something that's going to, I think, help the community.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we're all about here. Hey, dude, we just came off of reinvent. We're gonna do We're gonna do a movie. Yeah, we're gonna do an episode about reinvent here in a little while. But I mean, Danan, you got to deliver multiple talks at reinvent. So I mean, just let's take a couple minutes. We'll get into kind of you and your journey, and then we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about our skills gap in networking tonight. But I would love to know, just up front, while it's fresh in mind, how was reinvent?
Hey, reinvent was great. This is my second one. I presented last year. This one, what I found interesting was the excitement around cloud networking. We hosted a networking game day. This is a brand new launch for AWS. The team worked really hard to put this together. And we had about 250 people in the room. So the room was over 80% full, right? And people were just excited to dive into cloud networking. It was just amazing to see the excitement, the energy, and just the people that came out, you know what I mean? Because oftentimes when you talk about networking, it's one of those things that nobody talks about until something breaks or they need a new VPC or they need something new, right? Yep. So just to see the engagement from the community, not just in the game day, but also in the other sessions that we had going on throughout the event.
Oh, that's great, man. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, obviously, Cables to Clouds here, right? We're all about the cloud networking. So it's nice to see, cloud networking get more of a seat at the table, a little bit more of the spotlight. Okay. So sorry, I just had to ask that real quick. But for the people who don't, for the two of you that might be listening to this that don't already know Danan, Danan, if you wouldn't mind, take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us what you do over at AWS.
Yeah, so my name is Danan Lightfoot. I'm a developer advocate at AWS focused on cloud networking. I started my journey a long time ago, right? 20 years ago in IT in the Air Force, doing Windows NT to Windows 2000, basically on PDCs, the BDCs, to the introduction of Active Directory. So I kind of seen technology evolve throughout the years from those physical servers to the virtualization to the containerization, now to the cloud. And it's been an interesting ride, and it's been great to not only see, the application side evolve, but also the networking side, because now we're doing some really cool things in application networking. We're doing automation. All of these things are starting to come together to make the network engineering career look a lot more interesting and just kind of refreshing. You know what I mean?
And I think, maybe some listeners might hear that and hear, developer advocate for networking, and those two things don't relate, right? So how are you bridging that gap and doing kind of that developer advocacy with a networking standpoint?
Yeah, so I think as far as being an advocate for networking, I probably started doing that in 2018 when I started my YouTube channel and I started talking about Cisco certifications, routers, switches, how to learn networking and things like that. And then around the same time, I kind of shifted to doing Python and talking about network automation, which kind of led me to DevNet. And so those of you have heard of Cisco DevNet, on that journey, I was doing network automation. I created a Python for Network Engineers course that you can find on cisco.com and training and all that. And while doing that, it just kind of, the natural progression as you learn APIs, as you learn automation, is to eventually start using infrastructure as code and then eventually make that migration to the cloud, depending on your organization, depending on your goals. But oftentimes there's either going to be an opportunity for you as a network engineer to apply those to the cloud, or there's going to be some type of cloud network engineering team that you're helping out, assisting, standing up VPNs, and you're finding new ways to do that by using infrastructure as code. So to make a long story short, on my DevNet journey, it kind of led me to the cloud, which got me here to AWS. Since I understand networking, I understand software development, and now it's just kind of bridging the gap when it comes to communicating with not only developers, but also network engineers and the service team, business stakeholders as a whole.
That's really cool. I think we've talked about on this show about how, sometimes on-prem networking and automation kind of feels like a bolt-on thing that was added later, whereas in the cloud it was kind of built from the beginning, right? So it's just it's good to hear you say that you just naturally make that progression to the cloud just because of ease of operation and things like that.
That's a great point, Chris, because in the cloud, when you're in like the AWS console, right, and you click on the VPC console, you click on the EC2 consoles, all of those are API calls. They have a front end. Every service connects and builds on top of every other service on AWS. All of those are API calls. And so if you're using API calls, you have structured data. You can use declarative code to communicate with your infrastructure, deploy your infrastructure. Like, it's just a whole different mindset as compared to on-prem, which they're not saying it's a bigger hurdle, but it's actually just a more structured approach on how we deploy and how we automate and could build process around the upgrades, the change windows, and all of these things that we do on-prem.
Yeah, and this is something we've been talking about a lot lately, is kind of bringing those models, like the cloud models, to on-prem and how that gets built out. And like you see it, right? Like you said, it started out with a lot of the DevNet stuff where it was kind of bolt-on APIs, right? You had like netconf, restconf, but you start seeing all these like fabric overlays that are more meant to provide like that API, like more cloud-like approach, right? So it's like you said, it's been cool to watch just kind of that transition through the on-prem networking portion of things too.
Yeah. I'm so glad we have you for this episode, because we want to talk about what we came to talk about was, kind of the gap, not only just the gap in skills between, network engineering and say cloud network engineering, or really any two technologies or any three technologies, but how you're bridging that divide, how people are learning, going from, say, network engineering to cloud network engineering, or not even just going from, because it implies that you're leaving one behind and picking the other one up, or going to the other, but really you're just adding to your skill set. And, to hear, your progression for, career wise, it's exactly what we're here to talk about, right? Which is, building on it from, soup to nuts up to where you are now.
Yeah, it's building blocks. I mean, of course, networking at the foundational level is something that we need to understand. Although in the cloud, a lot of it is abstracted at that layer 1, layer 2 level, we still have to understand that to even connect to the cloud, at the on-premises level. So understanding that, having a foundation in networking, and then before you even dive into the networking piece in the cloud, understanding the building blocks, right? Understanding compute, what does compute look like in the cloud? What does storage look like in the cloud? What does security look like in the cloud? What does networking look like in the cloud? Understanding all of these fundamental building blocks and what the cloud is as a whole. Okay, how does it look like to protect in the cloud? How does it look like to secure connectivity to the cloud, in the cloud itself? And then what are the I would say abstraction layers, like the Amazon VPC? Okay, that's one compute type. What about serverless? How does that actually look? And then understand, okay, how do I connect to services? Oh, there's public services on AWS. Oh, wait a minute. IPv6 is really a thing, in the cloud. So now it's understanding that IPv6 is something that you probably need to learn. If you've been avoiding it at this point, I don't think you can do it too much longer. Like, now it's time to really dive into the IPv6 and understand it. Okay, what services support it? How do I secure it? Oh, I have a routing table. It has IPv4 and IPv6. I need to update that. What about security groups? We're running IPv4 and IPv6. We have to update both as well. So understanding how to apply these principles in the cloud is, I think, part of the journey. But the other part of the journey, since we're talking about the networking tools the fundamental tools and then understanding the cloud. The other piece is going to be the tools themselves. Like, how do you get visibility? Right? Because it's different. Running a ping isn't always going to work, especially if you have security groups applied.
Oh, yeah.
So what are the tools you can use in the cloud to get the visibility from source to destination? Because it's going to look different. And what if you're running different clouds? How do you get visibility between the two? How do you trace in between the two? How do you provide that secure connectivity between the two? And then the next piece is going to be BGP. I think when it comes to routing protocols, it's a little simpler, but you still have to understand it. It's something that, if you have not been using it on-prem, if you're connected to the cloud, BGP is probably something you're going to be running.
It's funny absolutely. And I forget who we were talking with offline. I think it might have been Andy, actually, from the Art of Network Engineering crew, where he was like, I've been railing against network, not to put words in his mouth, he could speak for himself, but I believe he said something along the lines of, I've been railing against, network automation for so long. And I just now realized that BGP is network automation to some degree. Anything really
route
dynamic, right? Anything dynamic, right? Learning routes dynamically rather than having to statically plug them in, into the CLI can be thought of as some form of, it's very basic automation. We almost don't even think of it that way anymore, but really it is.
So, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of architects that's been around a long time. And so when I first started talking about network automation in my organization, to them, it was nothing new, right? They've been writing Perl scripts. They've been using EEM. They've been doing all of these things forever, so to them, it's it's just something else glittery. We've been doing this a long time. It's nothing new, right? I really didn't understand it until I really started taking a step back. For on-prem, this isn't really anything new. But if you get into the cloud, that's where things kind of look different and they kind of change.
Yeah, and just to circle back to what you said about the building blocks, I feel like that's obviously that's where you got to start every time, right? But if we think about ourselves, the four of us on this podcast today, that we have close to a collective 80 years of experience in networking, right? Now there's a lot of people getting into this industry now, right, for the first time, and they're naturally drawn to. It seems like two things that are very popular: cybersecurity and cloud, right? The conversation has changed to that, right? What do I default to, right? So, but as someone getting into cloud, where do they get those building blocks from? Whereas we got it from Cisco for years and years, right? Are you seeing people getting into cloud go to the same route, or is it a little tougher for them?
I think it's two paths, right? No matter what cloud provider you go to, there's some type of foundational certification. For AWS, it's going to be the cloud practitioner. Cloud practitioner is going to teach you those building blocks. It just give you a quick high level overview for, let's say, those stakeholders, for someone that just want to understand what the cloud is, what are the services, what are the building blocks of the cloud. But then once you evolve beyond that, and you get that certification, is going to be the solutions architect, which tells you, okay, here are the building blocks, but here's how you build with these building blocks. And it kind of tells you how to architect those solutions. And so now you not only understand what the building blocks are, but you have some understanding of how to actually to put those building blocks together to architect solutions for customers, right? Now, it's a fundamental thing. If you study just for the certification, do you understand it from a book level knowledge? You actually have to go in there and build something to really get that applicable knowledge that you can say, okay, I understand if I create a VPC, I understand the route tables and everything that I need. Now I understand, okay, if I want to create some type of application that's high availability, I can use some type of load balancer, what is it, ELB or ALB or something to provide that connectivity outbound from the internet. You understand all of these different building blocks and how to secure it at let's say, an associate's level, which would be like the CCNA, like you mentioned.
So I got basically two more observations than questions here. But the first is when you were just going through your list of all the things, you just condensed 15 years of knowledge into a couple sentences, right? But it also, I think that speaks to how the cloud has changed things. Cause you're talking about you have to learn the compute, right? Like you can look at the cloud and you can learn all the different compute types. You can learn the different networking types. You can learn the different storage types, right? So I think it's almost like a completely different field almost, right? Because on-prem, everybody came up with their silos. It was like, oh, there's a server admin, there's a network admin, there's a storage admin, right? And now it's like when you come into the cloud, everything is so easy and consumable, generally speaking, right? But it's like that's the starting point is you can just go into all these abstractions right away instead of like having 3 siloed tracks and like having to work your way up like to an expert level basically in each one. So like, it was just more of an observation than a question.
Yeah, a lot of the heavy lifting is abstracted, right? I remember my last on-prem networking job. We were standing up Palos in between our data centers. And so those had to be physically placed, right? So that takes time. And then when you're doing an upgrade, of course, you got to manage the routing. You got to flip inbound and outbound between the Palos and the ASAs. You have to do all of these things while ensuring that you don't lose connectivity, which in the cloud is kind of like the same thing, but the physical part you don't have to worry about. And then the other part is the infrastructure as code. Like you can actually do this not just from an infrastructure as code standpoint, but you can actually stand up an entire new environment like that. You know what I mean? You don't necessarily have to fail something over. You can just create a whole new environment and stand that up and fail over to that. Just change your DNS or change your routing depending on how you want to do it. And your new environment is up. So it's a different approach. And I think just understanding the approaches that are out there, whether it's canary deployment, blue-green, brownfield, greenfield, and some of those terms on how you want to approach your infrastructure. But the infrastructure itself, I mean, it's kind of ephemeral, right? It's one of those things that is there for as long as you want it. And then once you don't want it anymore, stand up a new one.
Yeah, it's timely. I was on a design call not too long ago with someone, another architect, and they were showing a very complicated. This was not in AWS, this was in Azure, but it's relevant. It was a bunch of like UDRs pointing between different. Think of like firewall sandwich, like we would do on prem, but like in the cloud, right? So you got subnets that with route tables, UDRs pointing at interfaces for firewalls that come out the other end into another subnet, right? Really, really complicated the way the customer built this. And the question was, how are we going to migrate this customer off of it? And I was like, here's what you're going to do. This is really hard. You're going to build it differently. You're going to build the whole thing up again differently. And you're going to migrate them to that. You're not going to make this work. And he was like, well, that's dumb. You know what? If we have to do that, why don't we that could always be our answer. Maybe we don't ever migrate anybody to anything. And I'm like, welcome to the cloud. Like, that's like how we, we could do that. Not all the time, right? But I mean, you don't have to try to figure out how to do these complex migration patterns that you had to do on prem when you're actually pulling cables and moving and failing over fiber and stuff. You can build, like you just said, you can build it better and then just move your workloads over to it.
Right. It's all about what the customer needs, right? Whatever your business needs and understanding the solutions out there. And sometimes you may not know, but you can work with a solutions architect at AWS that can help you figure out, okay, do we lift and shift or do we do some type of something brand new in the cloud? But one thing you shouldn't do is try to build the same thing that you have on-prem in the cloud because it's probably going to be expensive for one. And for two, it's not always the most efficient way to do it. Which brings me to another point, and I don't think I mentioned this as far as like the skills you need to understand. I think part of that is going to be cost, right? One of the things we did have to do on-prem is understanding, I would say, like WAN optimization and things like that, capacity planning. We had to do these on-prem. And I would say in the cloud, it's not necessarily capacity planning, but you do have to understand costs. I think to be like a really valuable engineer, understanding, okay, if we have not gateways in one availability zone, but we have two availability zones and we're moving data across one availability zone to that NAT gateway, there's going to be a charge there. So understanding all those cost points in the cloud can be something that you can help your organization save to like purchase dollars and save money in the cloud and do some cost optimization at that standpoint. So again, it's a new way of thinking on how we approach developing and building our networks in the cloud.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I feel like that's been one of the most difficult things for a lot of standard engineers, even myself included, with migrating to the cloud, is being more kind of cost conscious with relating to throughput and things like that. Because half the time, whenever, someone's doing a migration project, they'll be like, okay, well, we got to consider this, how much are you sending traffic wise today? The answer is always, I don't know. Nobody knows. So it's always like just like a ballpark estimate that could be completely off. But it's the like you said about the visibility piece, is like, how are you going to monitor these things? It really factors into the overall cost of the solution.
I can share a talk from reinvent that kind of goes over data transfer charges, and if you would want to put it in the show notes, I think it'd be helpful for the audience to go through that, because again, that's a new way of thinking, and that's something that is, I think, be helpful to the community.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually done a 1 or 2 episodes about cost specifically, because we completely agree, right? That no, I want to get those in the show notes, but I mean is that we agree with you, right? Like we believe that engineering for cost is definitely something that's a skill that is very different on-prem, right? Like you said, like it's capacity planning and stuff like that on-prem. Here, it's very, very different. Engineering for cost is important. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, wasn't Werner's talk about the frugal architect, right? Like that's the whole, right? His whole thing from Werner Vogel's keynote was all about, was a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it was about being frugal and thinking of things like cost when you're architecting these solutions in the cloud.
Yeah. I love Vernal's talks. Every year he comes with it. He lost some weight too. He looks good.
Something we've been talking about a little bit, but I feel like we really haven't like hit it dead on yet, is when we talk about the skills gap between, say, network engineering and the cloud, but really, like I said, it's really any technology. What if you're a network engineer right now, and you got to pick up cloud, and that's going to be part of your thing, and I feel like the cloud and all the clouds, I think all the CSPs have done kind of a disservice on the training side for a lot of the network stuff. And what I mean by that is like, if I didn't know networking at all, like I don't think I could learn networking from the training that I get from the CSP, if that makes sense, right? Like it barely touches subnetting. You know what I mean? Like that's my opinion. That's all the CSP training that I've gone through. I having said that, I kind of to circle back a little bit to what Chris had said earlier, like, we learned probably on what's probably the industry, honestly, the gold standard of training for networking, which was, CCNA, right. Which is, I think maybe still is. I do feel like if you started from zero today and you decided that you wanted to do cloud and you were trying to learn networking from zero, I do still feel like the CSP training would not be sufficient. It might be sufficient for cloud. I don't think it would be sufficient for like anything beyond the kind of basic networking in the cloud. I don't know. What do you think?
It's tough because like when you look at the reinvent talks and for networking, we start at level 200, right? So it's already assumed that you have some basic understanding of networking.
Yeah.
Also, if you're talking about fundamental networking, we're starting basically at layer 3. Right?
Yeah.
So again, layer 1, layer 2 are kind of removed. So we're already at layer 3. And then much of that is still kind of abstracted. and how, yeah, we do art, but not really. You know what I mean? So it's kind of different in the cloud. So explaining it from a traditional networking standpoint would make sense, but I think you're better served by learning that is someone somewhere that specializes in that, and then coming to AWS and then picking up from the foundational tools that you already have.
Yeah, that's fair. And I realized after I asked the question that it sounded like maybe I was talking about, like any training that you or AWS have done. It really, in my head, what I was thinking was specifically like studying for the certifications, like the certification training, the stuff you see in the certs is very, very basic is kind of what I was meant. The actual AWS docs and the stuff like that you and the other, solutions architects and stuff put out is amazing. Like it's really, really good. Right. I'm thinking specifically of like when I took the CCP, a couple of years ago, and then when I took the solutions architect, it wasn't until I got to ANS. To be fair, ANS is like a specialty cert, right?
ANS is no joke. Yeah,
and that's a serious cert, right? Like that's a real deal. Anyway, just from a skill gap perspective, what I mean is if I'm a hybrid engineer or a network engineer and I want to become a hybrid network engineer, meaning hybrid cloud or both, or I want to do both, I do feel like I would be empowered. In fact, I was, right? Like we did it, all four of us did it, to make that jump, right? But there's a lot of people out there still today who are, they look at it like it's a mountain that they can't climb, so I'm still trying to you were both content creators, right? So I've been scratching my head as well. Like, how do I make this accessible? Like make it like, actually, this isn't hard. Just like come with me and take the first few steps. I don't know how, hopefully I'm making sense.
No, you're making sense. I've had a lot of conversations with this, and normally when I whiteboard something or diagram something, people get it. But I think the challenge is if you don't use it, you lose it. Like, oh, it makes sense. But then you go back into your organization, you're just standing up a VPN to 169.254, you know what I mean? Or something like that to AWS rather than actually seeing what's on the other side of that tunnel. So it's one of those things that if you're not getting hands on, it can be kind of hard to apply. Rather than traditional networking, you may get access to the layer 2 in your infrastructure. You might be a LAN engineer or something like that where, okay, someone can take me under my wing. I can actually see what they're doing. I can go rent the switches and routers, or I can get the switches and routers off eBay or Craigslist, go home, lab it up for myself. But now with the cloud, I got to kind of log in. Oh, somebody told me to worry about costs and I got to think about these things. So you don't know what you don't know. You may have some fear around that. So I think really helping people understand, okay, let's put in some budgets. Let's understand that, okay, if you deploy something in the cloud, let's tear it down. All right. Now here's some guides. Here's some fundamental things you need to know about building the VPC. We have a resource map that'll show you, okay, if you're in this region, you click on this VPC, here are all the resources. Here's your subnets. Here's your route tables. Here's your internet gateway, your S3 endpoints, your NAT gateway. Everything is right here clearly so you can see it, right? And then understanding that, okay, if you go to a different region, the VPCs are going to be totally different. And just getting them comfortable with going into the console. And once you get them comfortable there, building something, okay, let's spin up an EC2 instance. Let's launch that and do a basic Apache web server. So we can just see some web text. Oh, I deployed something in the cloud. This is awesome. And kind of just build on that. And now let's stand up a site-to-site VPN to my house. Maybe you have a Ubiquity router, or maybe you want to do client VPN to your laptop. Let's stand that up and just kind of build on things that they can actually do. And then once we're done, let's tear it down and then look at the charges that we may assume from running these services so we can understand, okay, I got an idea. Next time when I go through this, I'm going to look at the pricing calculator to really understand what I'm going to be charged for this lab that I'm going to be deploying. And now I have an understanding of how this all works. And I can really think about when I'm in an organization, the things that I should be thinking about when I'm building. That's my thoughts, but I'll let it hear your thoughts.
This is absolutely great call out about starting with, learning some of the cost stuff, because that's something I think I hear a lot. I'm sure you hear it a lot from people that are just kind of dipping their toes into cloud, is like, oh, well, I'm worried about how much it's going to cost. You know, I hear all these stories. There's that meme that's always going around about like, why are you homeless? Right. Because I left an EC2 instance on, right. But it's great that you point out that should be included. Like as soon as you start diving in, you were talking about like the billing calculator, the resource map, like all that stuff is super valuable. And I think that's not something that I hear many people talk about when they're talking about everybody usually is just like, this will be a couple bucks a month. Just go ahead and do this. But nobody understands, like you're calling out, why that's even a couple bucks a month, right? Like you should be looking at those things and creating billing alerts and all that other stuff. So great call out.
I've talked to so many people, directors, people that run organizations in the cloud, and like the number one thing that they struggle with is understanding like NAT gateway charges, because that's going to be under EC2 rather than under networking. So just understanding some basic like that, right? That if you're running in that gateway, it's going to be under EC2, or if you happen to deploy or create a domain under Route 53, every domain you create is going to be a 50-cent charge a month. You know what I mean? So understanding that the different charges that you see on these bills, although they may be 50 cent, maybe $1 or $2, but knowing why you're being charged for that and how to find them and being able to read, you know, your bill when it comes in every month. I think, you know, starting there and then understanding, okay, I'm doing this on my own, but there are platforms out there that will give me access to the cloud environment, right? Skill Builder on AWS. We have CloudQuest. We have all these different tools out there that you can go through, you can build, and you don't have to worry about using your own account, right? I think A Cloud Guru or these other sites as well, you can use those sites, pay the $29 a month or however much it is, and you can access the cloud environments. You don't necessarily have to worry about coming out of pocket. If you're worried about costs, there's ways around that.
Well, and those great call out on the like A Cloud Guru and those type of training sites. Not only do you get to use their environment, but they built a lab to teach you something, right? Like you don't have to go muddle through it yourself, right? The lab is right there with the guide and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's like something complicated, right, it can spin up pieces that are already in place that you might not have learned about yet, right? Just so that you can like play with something particular and you don't have to worry about building out the entire architecture.
Skill Builder too. I mean, it's like you said. Like I haven't tried CloudQuest now. I keep hearing about that from a few of my friends. I'll just check it. I just want to check it out.
It's actually pretty cool. You go into like this simulated environment and you have these different quests where you have to architect solutions to say, hey, I got this problem and we need to fix something. We can't figure it out. This is what we have now. And you as a solution architect, it gives you the type of questions that you should be asking to formulate the solution. So it's really, it's kind of nerdy, but it's still kind of cool on how it gives you like an idea of how you should be thinking about architecting solutions in the cloud. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it like a game, right? Kind of like how Duolingo does it, right? It's just teaching you a different concept and
gamify the learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And there's one for like, I think every domain. So there's, there's like the cloud practitioner, CloudQuest, there's the networking, there's a data analytics, there's like all these different quests, security.
Awesome. We'll have to get that one in the show notes too. And I'll have to spend some time playing with that. It sounds fun to me. I'm just one of those guys, nerdy guys, I guess, but it sounds fun to me.
Yeah.
I can verify.
The cloud practitioner
Tim
is free,
is indeed
so I'll get you that.
Nerd. So I'll vouch for that.
If it wasn't clear by all the stuff behind me.
So I want to circle back a little bit to the skills gap thing. And we're talking about, this is probably going to be speaking to like a niche of a niche, whereas like someone getting into the industry now that wants to be a networker and also wants to work in the cloud, probably not a ton of those people out there in the industry right now. But let's say if you were, a lot of these like networking focused certifications, at least from the different cloud providers, they all do kind of have this understanding that you come in with a level of networking knowledge that you're expected to obtain elsewhere, right? And if you're new, if you're convinced that you want to work directly in the cloud, if you're going through a CCNA course, there's probably so much bloat in there that you don't need, right? For that particular environment. Because, one of the best things I love about the cloud is there's no layer 2, right? And if I have to sit there and learn layer 2 for hours on end, for weeks on end, I'm probably going to, be bored to death. So that's like, how do we feel that newer people to the industry should tackle that? Should they kind of like build a better mind map of how networking works in the cloud and what constructs they need to learn and tackle them individually? Or how do we think they should approach that?
A better mind map. I do like that approach because I was actually talking to a community builder at reinvent, and he's architecting some amazing solutions, but he ran into a wall where he had to architect to some branch offices that were running SD-WAN. And he was just like, I just don't understand his on-prem stuff, but he really understands cloud networking. So I think you kind of have to understand or focus on where you are, right? So if you want to go to the cloud, understand the cloud. And then once you understand the building blocks and understand the hybrid connectivity, the VPC to VPC connectivity, and those things hybrid connectivity being how to connect to the internet, how to connect to other regions, how to connect like a standard site-to-site VPN, not necessarily direct connect or anything like that, but just understanding how to connect that VPC to connectivity, how to connect to the internet and from the internet. Understand that first. And then as you are faced with new challenges, I would say on-prem, and your knowledge gets a traditional understanding of the transit gateway, right? The VGW, understanding these tools. Direct Connect may be a challenge because getting your hands on that may be difficult, but at least read about it, right? Understand Route 53 because we do a lot of routing with Route 53. So understanding that as well. So once you understand like those 4 pieces, then start exploring on-prem because it's kind of hard to just, okay, let's throw all the darts on the board and kind of figure this out. I don't really have access to SD-WAN, but I'm going to learn about it. Well, you can get access to the cloud. You can connect VPCs. You can connect to other regions. You can peer transit gateways. You can do VPC peering. You can do all of these things in the cloud now, right? So start there. And then once you build that foundation and let's say you're tasked with something in your job, then scale out to the community and ask for advice on how you can learn things faster. Because I think having a community as you learn does help you to be able to, skip some steps as far as learning the hard things, because somebody that's been doing it for years can explain it simple, right? So I think I would start in the cloud and then work my way out. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's really good advice, actually, especially if someone is starting now and they want to start in the cloud. Like because it'll take a lot longer to pick up the extra cloud info, like the knowledge of SD-WAN and on-prem and all that, than it would take to pick up the cloud side of the house, by design, right? It's made to be more consumable and easier to understand.
Kind of the same thing. Like if you're getting into IT for the first time, you got to get in, just work at the help desk, right? You're doing shit that you don't really probably enjoy doing, but you find what you want to do and you expand on that. You learn on it, right? So I think that is good advice. Just at least get your foot in the door, or at least get some knowledge under your belt, and then work your way out.
Get started.
Yep.
Well, yeah, like you said, Tim, get started. That's the easy. Like it's as simple as that, right? It's so easy in the cloud. We've talked about this before. I think like one of our first episodes, we were like CDN, right? Like you can just have a global network in no time in the cloud. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, if you're worried about being able to lab it and get hands on, Danan, you're exactly right. Like just go to the cloud. You can spin up literally anything that you want to study very quickly and very easily. So.
Except for Direct Connect.
Yeah.
Except for Direct Connect, right?
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that I want everyone to think about is that there are companies that are cloud native. Just like there are companies that are 100%. Solely on-prem, there are companies that are cloud native. So if you want to focus on the cloud and you become really good at that, you could actually do that and work for a company where you're completely cloud native. I know people that started their career solely in the cloud and never had to do on-prem for the first 3-4 years of their career because the applications live in the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to. I know we're starting to run out of time, and I really want to get to this last piece, and I know you do as well, Danan. So let's. So one thing I wanted to, and this goes right with the skill gap thing, right? Which and on the back of reinvent as well, which was like the AI extravaganza. Something we've been talking about. I don't know if we've really gotten to talk about it on the podcast very much yet, but that I personally have been talking about in the community and stuff is how one of the things we need to do with AI, and this is my opinion, see what you think about it, is to make sure to either safeguard or just figure out how we're going to deal with the fact that as more and more things are handed off to like entry level type of work or operations level work is handed off to chat bots and AI and whatnot. How are the people that are junior today that want to be senior tomorrow going to be picking up that expertise, like learning those ropes and making those mistakes and whatnot? Are we cutting the bottom rungs off of the career ladder, to save money, essentially? I don't know. What do you think?
Man, it's moving so fast that if I give you an answer today, tomorrow, it's going to be totally different. Like
by the time this airs.
I'm gonna be 1000% honest. Every time I think about generative AI, it's something new that just makes me like, yeah, what I was saying last month, I had no idea what I was talking about because it's something totally different. But what I will say is that there's a couple pieces. I think we should use it to learn, right? I think we should use it as an assistant to help us learn faster, to simplify things that are complicated, break it down for us. And then we should also challenge it to give us the reference of the information, right? Sure. So if it's explaining something and you're not sure if it's right, ask it again. Is this right? Right? Because then it'll go back and say, and verify whatever it just told you and say, oh no, I was told wrong. Sorry about that. Let me give you the correct answer. You may have to iterate on that a couple times, but, I think you should use it for that, whether it's learning Python, whether it's learning networking. I think you should use it to learn and understand how to ask prompts, right? Understanding something as basic as that. The second thing is that like our documentation. The documentation in organizations is something that the ball gets dropped often, right? Like documentation I have rarely seen done well and done accurately, consistently. And so if we can leverage generative AI to even look at our ticketing systems, to look at our knowledge bases and kind of curate all this data into a database that we can leverage to help those entry-level technicians get the answers they need where they need it, right? A ticket gets open. It says, okay, there's a WAN link that's flapping. Well, I've seen this ticket about 4 different times. Here's the most likely reason. I've already contacted the service provider, et cetera, et cetera. Now send that to tier 1 so they can analyze it, triage it, see if any steps are missed, and then communicate with the stakeholders, or just have generative AI do it, right? Because you can put those safeguards in place. Like there's ways to put these safeguards in place. So I think that's one piece. But I think we should use it, for learning and to analyze data. I don't know if you ever had 100,000 lines of logs and had to filter through those logs to figure out the root cause or some type of root cause analysis.
Oh yeah.
That is painful. But have you ever took generative AI and had it look at some logs? If I had time, and if y'all want to look offline, we have this tool called Party Rock. And the first thing I built in Party Rock was a Cisco configuration analyzer. And what it does is you put a Cisco configuration in it, and it tells you everything about that configuration. You can query it to find the source destination for routes. You can see if, no matter if it's in scope or out of scope, it'll tell you that. The access control list, any vulnerabilities in the configs as far as insecure passwords, it'll do all that. Yeah. Same thing with ACLs. If you're filtering through laws of ACLs, it's great at that.
I was just going to say ACLs, man. God, that would be so helpful. Yeah. Or like a Wireshark analyzer. Oh my goodness, man.
But it's easy. My bad. Go ahead. I'll get excited. I'll be quiet.
No. I'll let you speak more. I wanted to mostly agree with the idea with the what you're saying, right? Like AI would be any kind of large language model, anything that can do AI analysis would be really good at taking data and making sense of it and presenting that as like, hey, an insight, right? You're taking actual insights. Where's that meme where you go from like, you got points on the paper and then you just like, here's the data and like, here's the insight, and you see them drawing pictures like with the dots and here's the actual insights from it.
That's like one piece, right? Using a large language model, but you can actually take that large language model that is like general, understands how to look at it as like a Swiss Army knife that could do a whole bunch of things, but you can actually fine tune that for the data in your organization. So it understands your documentation, it understands your network design, it understands all these things, it can answer and analyze routes, analyze access control lists really well because it actually understands your infrastructure. Like this is being done. This isn't something that's like theory. This is actually being done.
Yeah, right.
To me, that's like exciting because it can make a lot of the challenges that we face in networking simpler, you know?
Yeah. So the concern and agreed with everything you just said. The concern I have, and it's really goes back to the original question or the original thesis statement that I had there was, how long will it be before a business decides that is good enough as like say a help desk, right? And so somebody who was looking to get an entry level job on the help desk to get their career started and like get that experience, just that position doesn't need to exist anymore, right? We automated it away essentially. And that I'm not saying whether it's good, bad, or ugly. That's technology, right? At the end of the day, that's technology, and that's just how it is. I'm wondering, okay, so now that person, and I know you, but so now that person like doesn't, that there's no entry level. I guess how long before there's no entry level, right? And then how do you get the experience to become senior at that point? I guess is where I'm thinking.
That is a really tough answer, but I read a lot of the white papers, and I'm gonna send this all to you now.
Okay.
But OpenAI has a white paper that's called GPTs are GPTs, an early look at labor impact on potential of large language models. And basically what they looked at is how large language models is affecting the entire industry. Basically, these large language models, generative AI is affecting 90% of all jobs. The only jobs that it's not affecting is things that you do with your hands.
That makes sense.
And then it said by the year 2029, it's going to be just as good as like a mid-level developer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't think it's necessarily, okay, it's going to be taking the entry-level jobs and those are just gone. I just think that it'll be different on what those jobs actually look like.
Right? No, that's a good answer. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Anyway, it's I'm not bullish or bearish on AI. I think technology is technology, and people, it's coming whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, and whatnot. I am curious about some of the considerations that I am a little bit concerned that all the corporations are kind of like not paying it. Everybody's in a race, right? And so the race tends to run over everybody. It's on the track, if you will.
I think it's...
I feel like we've seen this before though, right? With like the .com boom or something where everybody just had to get a website. I think we're like the infancy of something that's new. What the end result looks like, I have no clue, but it's here and I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's hard to predict, just like you said, Danan. It's like it's so fresh and there's a million theories we can throw out. And I think, Tim, to kind of go back to your hesitancy about it, I think it is probably going to make infrastructure workers, like a more IT infrastructure professionals, probably more of a niche thing than it is right now. It's not going to be as widespread. I think probably at some point getting into tech is going to be being a developer, right? Because all of this stuff is either abstracted from you or it is automated for you. Even the troubleshooting of it is automated. So, it's like, you see Amazon Q, right? And it just got launched and it's like, how do I build this? Like the it dumbs it down. Well, not dumbs it down. I hate to say it like that, but it makes it a very consumable and bite-sized thing for you to build networking, security, things like that, right? So I feel like it's just gonna, like you said, Danan, it's gonna change the way these jobs are done. There's still going to be people that are going to need to be very fine-tuned, experts at that craft and building it for the consumption of other people. But I feel like we just probably got to hopefully this boat stays afloat until we all retire, and then we'll be all right. But I think it is going to change quite drastically.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Chris, when you said expert. I think the days of being kind of like a generalist and, having a long lasting career as someone that is comfortable just having a job, I think tech is going to push boundaries to where if you want to like grow in your career, if you want to get like, let's say even, I hate to speak money, but just to say get to certain dollar amounts that you're going to have to be an expert to where if the model does give some inaccurate information or there's something incorrect going on with the data, that you can analyze this and see it. And those will be the people that will stand out and be the most valuable. I think that's if I am to give some sort of opinion.
I was just going to say, I think to your point, Danan, you got to be able to, if there will be a fewer experts in the world that there is right now, but you also got to be able to adapt, right? Because the job market's got to be catering to what your skills are and that expertise is, right? Because I'm sure we have several Cobalt developers out there right now that aren't getting work for that. So it's like they're you got to be able to switch with the times, right?
Yeah, I want to point out. I also think that this is like we're in the middle of this. I like humanity has a history of kind of like new things coming in and disrupting things and finding ways to adapt and grow through it. And this is just the one that we're going through. It's kind of like my point here is like, we feel like this is going to change everything, but who's to say in like 30 years, people look back and it's like something that we look back on 30 years ago, right? Like it's hard to say, and maybe we all just adapt through it and things do change. Like Dawan's saying.
One thing that I did, I don't know if I've made it clear, but when I said like the .com boom, is one of the things about the .com boom is that it made .coms accessible for everybody, but only the few really knew the opportunity that was there. And I think generative AI makes building accessible for everybody, right? We're going to have new Fortune 500, 100 companies that may have 10 people. Because you don't need as many people to build solutions. Like it's a new approach. And so for those that want to build, there's opportunity for you to build your own industry or whatever you want to build without having all of the pieces that you needed previously, because now you have generative AI to kind of help do the things today that you would say, if only I had a lawyer to review this document, or if I had somebody to focus on my documentation or to guide me through this code or to do all of these things. Now, like it's kind of accessible for anybody to build a team of assistants to establish whatever dream they have. That's my thoughts. I don't know.
That's good.
You could be like a prophet or this could fall flat, but like your quote about like there might be Fortune 100 companies with 10 people. That's just like that's a interesting way of looking at it and just makes me really, really think. I just really like that because it could be true. You never know.
Yeah, we're scratching the surface. Regardless of how it goes, we're definitely scratching the surface at this point. And I don't think any of us knows where it's going to look like in a month, much less 20 years from now, or even
Sam Altman will be back fired again, right?
That's right. Yeah. What is it, Tuesday or Sam Altman's fired again today? No, I'm kidding. No, I mean, that's the kind of weird crap that keeps going on though. So yeah, I'm very interested to see. I am a little cautious, but the tech's here and we're all going to have to figure out how to deal with it. We're going to have to figure out how to make use of it, how to adapt to it. It is what it is. So anyway, I know we're out of time here. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Danan, thank you for being on. Any closing thoughts you'd like to close with?
Yeah. Tim, Chris, Alex, thank you for having me on. I wish you all much success on Cables to the Cloud. For me, for the community, I think this is the best time to be in tech because information is still freely available. The resources are widely available. There's people like Tim, Chris, and Alex that are helping, doing whatever they can to help you all grow and advance in your careers. I think whatever you want to do, take advantage of it, find the right communities, the right resources, ask questions, learn, be curious, and just don't stop. Go after it. Thank you.
Chris, Alex, you want to anything for you guys? Chris, you want to kick us off? Since you're going to talk over Alex anyway.
Yeah, all good. No, I think this has been absolutely wonderful. So yeah, thanks Danan for coming on. We've had you on our list for a while as someone to have on the pod. So I'm glad we finally got to make that happen. And I think you really touched on something in that last closing thought that you had about a lawyer reviewing documents and how it relates to AI. And I'll just spoil it for everyone. Lawyer.ai is already taken, so you can't have that. But I'll let you go, Alex.
Thanks. No, I don't really have anything, Danan. This was awesome. That was a hell of a send off. So I just wish you best of luck, man. It's been great watching your journey and just following what you do and the content you produce. So thanks for coming on.
Yep. And I mean, hopefully we can have you on again in the future. I do love what you said about this is probably the best time to be in tech. I know we just painted this doom and gloom scenario where like everybody's job is gone tomorrow, but he's absolutely right. I mean, it has never been easier to learn anything you want to learn, right? When we were up and coming, it was tough, right? And especially before the internet, it was damn near impossible, I swear. But now, I mean, right now, yeah, man, it's never been easier. That's absolutely agree with you. So, so this has been Cables to Clouds. Thanks for joining us. Obviously, I'm your host, Tim, Chris, Alex, Danan. Thanks for being with us. If you liked what you heard tonight or saw, depending if you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel or listen to us in your favorite podcatcher. And we're out. Hi, everyone. It's Tim, and this has been the Cables to Clouds podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed our show, please subscribe to us in your favorite podcast catcher, as well as subscribe and turn on notifications for our YouTube channel to be notified of all our new episodes. Follow us on socials at Cables2Clouds. You can also visit our website for all the show notes at cables2clouds.com. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.